What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants, powered by BetUS. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And tomorrow, guys, we get the preseason finale, week 3 of the preseason final game for the New York Giants, taking on the New York Jets. They're in-stadium rivals. Should be a fun one, should be interesting. Not a lot of starters expected to play. The Giants might play some fringe starters, maybe a guy like a Tyler Nubin and Dane Belton, maybe Nick McLeod and some of those other young guys in the secondary. But for the most part, don't expect to see Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. Don't expect to see Andrew Thomas. Most of those guys are probably going to be taking a breather for the next week and preparing for September 8th versus the Minnesota Vikings. But either way, this is an important matchup for the Giants. Maybe not necessarily for the starters, but for all those backup guys still competing for a spot on the 53-man roster, there are quite a few storylines to keep an eye on. Whether you want to talk about Elijah Chapman pushing for that DT2 job, whether you want to talk about Trey Hawkins pushing for the CB2 job, there are definitely some storylines to follow going into this final preseason game. So that's kind of what we want to unpack. We want to just discuss some of the things that we're keeping an eye on and that we're excited about for the preseason finale. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how excited are you for the preseason to finally be over and to be heading into the regular season?
Good God, I'm so excited. I cannot wait for the season to already start, man. It feels like the preseason just feels like torture because you're just praying guys don't get hurt, and you're praying for things to go smoothly, and your team to show signs of progress and whatnot. And the Giants have a lot of things to solve, obviously, but a lot of positive things, obviously, going into the season, like Malik Neighbors and some really talented young rookies. And this final preseason game, as you mentioned, not many starters, but fringe starters for sure. I wrote this morning about a couple players who are competing for those starting jobs, including Nick McLeod, Elijah Chapman, and as you mentioned, Dane Belton and Tyler Nubin. That is still an ongoing position battle, by the way. I do think that right now it's up for grabs. Like, Tyler Nubin, I think, does have the lead slightly, but a big performance in Dane Belton could change that quickly. So, we'll see what happens. I think they go with the hot hand going into the season. Chapman, right now, Raheem Nunez-Roche, probably the early down guy. But, dude, I looked at Chapman's numbers. He had 5 pressures in those 2 preseason games and a couple holding calls to boot. Like, he looked excellent. Really, really exciting stuff. So I was definitely encouraged by his performance. Obviously, the 16-mile-an-hour, 287-pound full sprint to chase down a running back was impressive in of itself. Got him a roster spot, to be quite honest with you. But really excited about his potential out of SMU, undrafted free agent. A lot of the explosive, tangible traits were on display, and obviously Andre Patterson identified those, and now view him as a potential long-term solution next to Dexter Lawrence as he continues his development. Nunez-Roche last year with the Giants, he's definitely gone after the season. Got Jordan Riley, Chapman developing, so some good talent there. Excited to see how things progress, and I think he will get a lot of action in this game. I don't think Drew Lock plays this one, and I think the early signs are that Tommy DeVito, the Cutlet boy, is going to be getting the full action in this one. So lots of Tommy DeVito. We'll probably see some rookies like Theo Johnson and whatnot. Maybe Tyrone Tracy will get a little action. I really hope we do get to see Tyrone Tracy coming off that ankle sprain. I don't know if they'll play him, but if he does, really excited to see him. I'm sure we'll see plenty of Eric Gray. Another opportunity for him to make an impact. But this is honestly a big opportunity for a lot of the linemen, to be quite honest with you. No Andrew Thomas, probably no Jermaine Illuminor, probably no John Michael Schmitz. We're going to see most of those rookies out, or rather starters out. But you're going to see guys like Aaron Stinney. You're going to see Josh Azidu. You're going to see some of those players trying to fight their way into this backup role. Maybe we'll see Evan Neal a bit. He's definitely in that equation right now in the backups, and had a couple of good snaps against the Jets in joint practices earlier this week. But, for the most part, I'm just excited to see how this offense holds up. The defense, yes, we know their weaknesses. We know the secondary needs support. We know that they're going through these issues and will likely be addressed. But, Anthony, how important is it that our backup offensive linemen show competency? Because we've seen in the past, injuries happen and we're like scrambling to find solutions. Those backups showing some synergy, some chemistry is so important to the long-term success of this team, because if somebody goes down, and injuries happen every year, you have a competent piece to step in, at least play as a teammate. Like, yeah, they're not going to be as good as the starters, but at least they can go in there and hold their own and understand their assignment and understand where they're supposed to be. That is so invaluable, and I think sometimes goes a little bit under the radar.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's really important, and it's great on you to call that out. Watching the second and even third string offensive linemen gives you a lot of perspective for the depth of the team and the insurance that they've given themselves, right? Because we've seen in the past, like you said, injuries they come up on the offensive line every single year, which is, tying into the larger part of this discussion, why I'm so excited to hopefully see Evan Neal play in this upcoming preseason matchup. We've discussed this a couple times over the past few days on the channel. I want to see Evan Neal go out there and turn in some good reps, show that Carmen Brasillo's coaching is rubbing off on him, and he's making progress towards being an NFL player. But it's not just him. There are other backup offensive linemen that I'm excited to see. Marcus McKetton, how's he looking? Josh Azito's had a couple of ups and downs so far in this preseason, has looked really good as a run blocker, still has his struggles as a pass protector. What does he show on the field in this final preseason game? And another thing to note, Alex, is this Giants backup offensive line is going to be going up against a Jets backup defensive line that, to be honest, starts for most teams. The Jets defense is really stacked. They have a ton of depth on the defensive line. They have a lot of guys who are legitimate players going up against this Giants backup offensive line. Like, again, you're talking about people in that Jets defense who are backups on that team, starters on others. That's a great matchup for this Giants preseason squad as they prepare for the regular season. So I do think it's important to kind of watch what the continuity looks like, how well the pass protection is, and if those rushing lanes keep opening up, because in that first preseason game versus the Detroit Lions, we saw that offensive line look stellar in run blocking, opening up lanes for Tyrone Tracy, who you mentioned, and for Eric Gray, who I'm also excited to watch in this final preseason game. They were running all over the place. They had lanes to run all night long. But then in that second preseason game, Alex, I thought the run blocking was pretty suspect. I thought that the Houston Texans defense did a really good job stifling the Giants running game, and I thought the backup offensive linemen struggled in that facet of the game. Meanwhile, they were great in pass protection. So what are we going to get in this third preseason game? Is it going to be more of a mixed bag where we get good pass pro and bad run blocking? Are we going to get consistency in both facets of the game? That's what I'm keeping an eye on, because I do think it's not the starting lineup, but it still is a pretty decent indicator of where the strengths of this unit are and where the strengths of Carmen Brasillo's blocking scheme lie. So I am just pretty curious to watch the battle in the trenches. Offensive line for the Giants, those backups. Defensive line for the Giants, those backups. We're going to see some more Azeez Ojulari and Boogie Basham Jr. What's this edge depth looking like? How do those guys perform? Do they start taking snaps on the interior as pass rushers, like Shane Bowen has kind of floated that idea so far this offseason? So, Alex, flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, again, we've talked a lot about Elijah Chapman. Everybody knows we're really excited about him. The Giants are really excited about Chapman, but still, I think that edge depth is another key piece to keep an eye on in this game with Boogie Basham and Azeez Ojulari. So what are your thoughts on this defensive line? What are you keeping a close eye on there?
I mean, look, this defensive line, it has top 5 potential with the starters in. The backups, you see these things like these guys. Azeez Ojulari is a starter on some teams. I think that we have some very solid depth. You kind of look over at the Jets side of the football, and you're like, okay, they don't have a Son Reddick right now. And you kind of look at, okay, well, they have Clemens, and they have Tack McKinley, who's looking pretty good, apparently, according to my uncle, who's a Jets fan. And, of course, they have Will McDonald, who's a rookie, or rather a second-year player, drafted in the first round last season. So, they got some depth, some okay players. The Giants arguably have a better defensive line than them. You could make a strong argument to say that. Without Hassan Reddick, I'd say it's pretty easy to say the Giants have a better defensive line. I'd say Dexter Lawrence is better than Quinnen Williams. Not to say that Quinnen Williams isn't a A1 player. He is elite. That you could say on any given day, those guys are 1A, 1B. But I think Brian Burns right now is better than anything they have. Obviously barring Hassan Reddick returning to practice for them. And Kayvon Thibodeau is better than Will McDonald at this point in his career. So, Giants, Jets, if you're looking at starters comparing the defensive line, I say the Giants do have the edge there. But then when you look at the secondary, it's a whole different ball game. DJ Reed, honestly, Anthony, to throw out a name that we could see maybe as a Giant in the future, don't sleep on DJ Reed maybe being an option for the Giants in free agency next year. DJ Reed is a very solid football player, and he would be a very good CB2 for this Giants team. He's a leader. He's well-respected, very solid. He'll be a little bit older, so they won't have to pay him top dollar. He'll still get a nice contract, but nothing of the CB1 kind of category. But him and Deontay Banks for another 2 years would be pretty solid, if you ask me, especially if they just make a nice push here and give DJ Reed some of that experience. So, might be a good idea to get yourself familiarized with a guy like that heading to free agency, and the Jets cannot afford him long term. So that could be an option, especially having played in New York and at MetLife. We know he can, maintain his health and whatnot. But in any case, I do think that in terms of the defensive line, I want to see these guys, these depth pieces, kind of rise to the occasion. The Jets have a solid offensive line, a lot of depth there now. They got Tyrone Smith, Elijah Vera Tucker's back, Morgan Moses, Olu Fashanu. I bet you maybe Fashanu gets some action in this game. I don't think he's considered the starter. You might be able to correct me on that, but Moses and Tyrone Smith, I believe, are the primary starters for now. So we might see a little bit of Fashanu in this one. So a guy like Azeez Ojulari would be a really good opportunity to kind of capitalize on that. But speaking of the defensive line, guys, want to talk about our sponsor, BetUS, for 1 second. Take a look at some of the lines for Brian Burns this year. Brian Burns is a obviously really talented pass rusher, 26 years old, going into his prime. I'm excited to see what he can do. And Anthony, I want to discuss with you a little bit about his line here and where you can capitalize 125% up to $2,000 on your investment immediately to BetUS. We have the link in the description and obviously in the comments pinned as well. So make sure to go capitalize on that. So here we have Brian Burns at 8.5 sacks on the over at -125. I kind of like this one. I think that he can easily hit this. Watching him so far has been, I mean, he's looked dominant to say the very least. I think that -125 for 8.5 sacks, very, very doable. I also think Kayvon Thibodeau has the same exact line at 8.5 sacks as well. So I definitely think that for the most part, if he can just stay healthy, and I think he will, Kayvon played like 180 more snaps than him last year. I very much think that he's going to pass 8.5 sacks, especially with Dexter Lawrence soaking up those double teams. You know, Anthony, what are you thinking about Brian Burns? I think I'm going to throw a little 25 beans on this one because 8.5 feels like a pretty fair number for him.
No, I'm with you there. I like the over on 8.5. I mean, if you look at his career stats, as a rookie in 2019, he had 7.5. Then he backed that up with 9 sacks, 12.5. This past year, a little bit of a drop off in production, only 8 sacks with the Carolina Panthers in 2023. But let's face it, guys, he was playing on one of the worst teams of the last decade with that Carolina Panthers team. A lot of problems over there in Carolina. Held Brian Burns back just a little bit. He finished the year with only 8 sacks, but now you have to imagine playing alongside a pocket penetrator like Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau on the other side of him. The opportunities for one-on-one pass rushing opportunities will be very abundant for Brian Burns. I think he's going to get into the backfield quite a bit, pressure the quarterback. I do like him for over 8.5 sacks. I think there's actually a very realistic chance that he cracks double-digit sacks for the second time in his career.
I 100% agree. And looking at Kayvon too, same thing here, -125 for 8.5 sacks. I really like that line as well. Honestly, I think I'd probably just take both of these. I think with Dexter Lawrence soaking up those double teams and these guys, and you see Shane Bowen's defense, that these guys coming off of the edge at a much wider set, it's going to open up a lot more opportunities for these 1v1 battles and having them with a little bit more space. We saw the spin move. We know Kayvon has that really nice inside move. I think that this is going to be, I'll throw a little 25 spotter on Kayvon Thibodeau. Season long, 8.5. As long as these guys stay healthy, I don't see why they can't do this. I don't see why either of these guys can't capitalize on an 8.5 sack line. But, you know, as I said, make sure to sign up to the BetUS. We're going to be doing this all year long, following along and tailing us, obviously. I put 50 on the Burns one because I think that he's just a better player, and Kayvon up at 25 because I still think he's going to get there. But the health is obviously imperative. Make sure to use the description link and in the comments as well. You get a ton of money. If you match it, they'll match you up to $2,000, 125% maximum. So really, really good deal there. Make sure to capitalize. So obviously breaking down this Giants defensive line is Azeez Ojulari, a guy that when healthy is a very, very impactful piece. And Boogie Basham's okay, he's decent, but mostly I'm really want to watch Elijah Chapman, Anthony. I am really into watching Chapman. I imagine you're kind of feeling the same way. Do you think he can? I think they're already saying he's going to be a primary option as like a pass rush kind of interior defensive lineman, maybe not on the early downs, but I think he could steal those reps from Roche if you know he keeps from performing like this and gaining momentum at some point in the season. I can see by week 7, week 8, you know, he's starting next to Dexter Lawrence long term.
I totally agree with you. I think that Elijah Chapman has limitless potential just because of his size and athletic profile. He's not one of those big hog mollies, to throw back to that annoying word that Dave Gettleman used to use. He's not one of those kind of like anchors that plays your zero. He's more, I want to compare his playing style to somebody that Giants fans are familiar with. He's got more of that ability to play that 3-tech between the guard and the tackle that Leonard Williams used to play because he's a little bit undersized and has a lot of athleticism. That's what I like for Elijah Chapman. I think that he's going to be your interior pass rusher who comes in, especially on passing downs, second, third, fourth down. I think that you'll see a lot of Chapman. Now, when it's obvious run situations, run defending situations, maybe Chapman comes off the field, Jordan Riley or Nacho go on. But I do think that Chapman has earned his spot on the roster and has earned quite a bit of playing time through his performance, not only in training camp, but also in the preseason. But Alex, I do want to jump over. We've spent a lot of time on the defensive side of the ball. I want to jump over to the offensive side of the ball. Not talk about the trenches any longer. I want to talk skill position players. There's one player who's, I guess, technically a starter, but maybe not. I don't know. I need to see a big game out of Jalen Hyatt. I don't know how you're feeling about it. He had that sick one-handed grab against the Texans that didn't count, didn't get his feet in. Outside of that, he hasn't done a whole ton. I mean, he had a reception against the Lions that he caught for no gain. There just hasn't been a serious amount of production from him. Meanwhile, Darius Slayton looks awesome. So what is the future for Jalen Hyatt? How much of a role is he going to play during the regular season? I'm not entirely sure, but I would like to see him finish the preseason on a high note, carry that momentum into the regular season. Alex, what is your take on that? How are you feeling about Jalen Hyatt? And do you think that he should play a significant amount of snaps tomorrow night?
He has to. He has to. Like, this guy needs to grow more and show more upside here. I mean, look, I like Jalen Hyatt. I think he's got plenty of upside. The speed is legit. But there are details to his game that are missing. And Darius Slayton is the better player right now. And Slayton's going to get those snaps. And, we've talked heavily about Slayton being a big trade piece. If the Giants aren't very good, like, he'll be the first one to be moved and how valuable he is. And they obviously don't want to give him that second contract because they view Hyatt as his replacement long term. Otherwise, they would have given him a second contract. But the truth is simple. Like, if Hyatt doesn't develop the way that we need him to, can you let Darius Slayton go? That's a conversation for another day, in a couple of weeks, if not months. But, it is something that we have to discuss at some point if Hyatt doesn't take these big steps forward. And for now, he has not earned the right to be sitting out of games, right? He has not earned the right to be sitting out of games. And similar to how we've discussed the secondary, Hyatt's got to step up and make an impact. Hyatt's got to step up and be a WR2 for this team long term. And to do that, got to have more experience, got to rise to the occasion. He's got to go out there, build a rapport with Tommy DeVito, and beat up on some backups. That's what he's got to do, because good players beat up on backups. And if you want to be a good player, you got to go out there and do it. So I want to see Jalen Hyatt go out there, elevate his game, beat up on these backups, have a big performance, connect with Tommy DeVito, and build some chemistry there. Because at the end of the day, we need to see more from him, and I 100% agree with you. He's got to be out there on Saturday.
Yeah, totally agreed. And Tommy DeVito, that's kind of the one that I want to round off with. We're probably getting at least 3, maybe even 4 quarters of Tommy DeVito. You guys know I am excited for that. And I just kind of want to bring up this question, Alex. Tommy DeVito hasn't necessarily looked like a star during the preseason. He hasn't looked great. He had a couple of really nice throws against the Lions. He struggled against the Texans, as did pretty much everybody on the offensive side of the ball for the Giants. But I just want to throw out this hypothetical because we haven't seen much of Drew Lock. What we saw from Drew Lock in that first preseason game was bad. Like, he did not play well. Then he got hurt, and he's been dealing with an injury ever since. Who is the QB2 on this roster right now, right? Because Tommy DeVito's gotten the majority of the preseason reps. He's played well at times. He's struggled at other times. Has he done enough to earn QB2? And if not, can he earn QB2 with a solid performance tomorrow night? I'm curious to know your thoughts on that. For me personally, I think because he's just generally healthier than Drew Lock, since Lock had that oblique injury, and because he's gotten more reps with the backups and gained a little bit more chemistry and experience in the offense, I don't really see why Tommy DeVito shouldn't be considered QB2. But again, they did pay Drew Lock $5 million. He's obviously got more upside, I guess, because he was a former second-round pick. And, there's a lot of variables to it. But I do feel like with DeVito, one really solid performance tomorrow night, maybe he does open the season as QB2 on the depth chart.
I mean, right now, it's up for grabs. Look, Drew Lock is hurt. Obviously, he seems to be okay, and he'll be back. But I think the Giants do view Drew Lock as their QB2 because of his experience over the past couple years, because of his experience in multiple systems, because of his arm talent. I mean, he's objectively has a strong-ass arm. Like, he could launch that thing. He's wildly inaccurate, but he can launch that freaking thing. So, that's kind of what you're getting with Drew Lock. You're getting, like, early days Josh Allen with his arm, like, where he has ridiculous, he can throw the ball 80 yards, but you don't know where it's going to land type of guy. So, we'll see how things progress there, and he makes some really weird decisions sometimes, but he is getting used to a new system, a new scheme, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think right now he is QB2. Tommy DeVito, a big performance tomorrow would close that gap, and really listen, when I think about Tommy DeVito, I need him to take steps forward so he can be our backup next year. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really thinking about this year as Tommy DeVito's, like, this is where he's back. He has to get to a point where we can feel confident him starting on a day-to-day basis if we needed him to, and he can operate this offense with confidence. And this is a different offense than it was last year, right? This is Brian Daboll's offense. This is not Mike Kafka's offense anymore. So, this is a different play calling, different system. I think Tommy DeVito is a fine player. He's far outweighed his draft selection as a UDFA out of Illinois. He is way better than where he was taken. But with that being said, we need to see a little bit more consistency from him, a little bit more confidence, a little bit more pocket presence, a little bit more decisiveness, and I think that will close the gap between him and Drew Lock. I'm thinking about 2025, 26, 27, having a really cheap backup long term and him getting to that point. But I think that Drew Lock, the $5 million guaranteed dollars, does weigh on the Giants, and it does make him QB2 for now. But that doesn't mean Tommy DeVito's out of the race long term. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a part of that equation next season and beyond as a primary backup, depending on whatever the Giants do at quarterback. So that's kind of how I foresee the future of Tommy going, closing that gap and getting to a point where the Giants really feel confident in him that they don't have to go out and bring in a competitor to kind of unseat him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I still, believe in Tommy DeVito. I think the potential is there. I just think it's going to take him some time to rise above the expectations and the narratives of him being a UDFA. But I think tomorrow is a really good opportunity for him against, again, it's backups, but a good Jets defense. Go out there, play well. Maybe you are QB2, and then if there is an injury during the regular season, if your name gets called once again and you play well once again like you did last year, who knows? Something could be in store for Tommy DeVito long term. So you guys know I'm rooting for him. Actually, Alex, this is pretty funny. Doing a Jets show recently, and the idea got floated out there. Should I eat one chicken cutlet for every touchdown that Tommy DeVito scores in this preseason game?
Is that a bad thing? I feel like that's a great. That's not a punishment. That's like a great.
Let me rephrase. It was for every point scored. So that would be 6 points.
That's multiple chickens potentially. That's multiple chickens. You'll be begging them to run the ball in the end zone. That's for sure. I mean, you're saying like, does he have to throw them or just points in general?
I don't know what the clarification was on it, but if the Giants end up putting up 20 points in that game, there's no way I'm putting down 20 chicken cutlets without ending up in the hospital. So
I mean, they could be like chicken nugget cutlets, like they'd be like little chicken cutlets.
Chicken nuggets, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 14 chicken nuggets does still sound like a lot.
Yeah, but
I mean,
make it work.
You can make it work. That's a lot of chicken. It's a lot of chicken. I mean, that's an interesting thought process to get to that point. But yeah, that's quite the risk there. You're gonna be a little sick after the cutlets. You may not want to have a cutlet ever again after that many chicken cutlets.
Yeah, I can't risk that because chicken cutlets are like my life. So risking getting appalled by chicken cutlets would just be too big of a risk.
Yeah, you know what? Like, there's some. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this, but like, you just eat something so much that you're like, one day you're like, I can't ever eat this again. Like, that's like me in PB&J's in like middle school. I had like PB&J every day for like 2 years, and now like I taste PB&J, and I'm like, I don't want this ever. Like, I can't do this. It also happened with liquor, but that's another story.
I think everybody's got one of those stories.
Yeah, everyone's got one of those stories.
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, if there is a market for this, if the fans and the audience and the viewers comment down below and they really want to watch me live stream myself eating chicken cutlets tomorrow night, if we get enough comments for it, I'll consider doing it. Let us know down below. But Alex, anybody else that stands out to you, somebody that you want to keep a close eye on in tomorrow's game? I'm going to throw out one last position group, tight end. I don't think we've seen a ton from Daniel Bellinger this summer. I think we've seen some highs and some lows from Theo Johnson. I'd like to see him get more involved and make some good plays. That's a position I'm keeping an eye on. But anything else for you, maybe tight end or otherwise?
I mean, I do think that I want to see more Theo Johnson. I think that he's got to be playing. Yeah, he's a starter, but he's a rookie. So, like, you got to get more experience under his belt. Got to be able to work into this offense. And the more time he sees on the field, the better, in my opinion. The Jets' backup defense is going to be good. Like, their defense is legit. Obviously, their starting defense is one of the best in football, but their backups are really solid. And by the way, talk about players that we're going to be watching. I'm watching the Jets guys because those are players we might be able to claim on the waiver wire. So there might be some really solid young players there that have upside that we're looking to snag, guys like Jason Pinnock. So I do think that the Jets, if you're watching the Giants game, also watch the Jets game. You know what I mean? Like, watch their defense, watch their offensive, watch some of these guys that could be cut casualties, and players that the Giants may be able to scoop up and add to their equation in long-term developmental projects. So, aside from just the Giants guys, tight ends, whatever it might be, I'm focusing on the Jets as well.
Yeah, I do totally agree with you there. That's a really good call out. The Jets have some decent back end of the roster players. Like I said, they have a ton of depth on that defensive line. Let's see who shakes free. Could be interesting. They even have some good players in the secondary as well. Obviously, the Giants keeping a close eye on the cornerback market, whether that be via trade or the waiver wire, free agency, whatever. Maybe somebody on the Jets shakes free, hits the waiver wire, or maybe the Jets play this game. Joe Shane keeps his eye on a specific player and says, hey, Joe Douglas, after this game, let's work out a trade for that guy. I don't want you guys to put him on the waiver wire. I don't want to risk him going to a team ahead of us on the priority list. So that could happen. That happens often, way more often than you think. So that could be something to keep an eye on. And of course, all these storylines and many more going to be covered in the post game right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Fireside Giants powered by BetUS. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're watching us on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one. And
perfect.